10,000 subscribers. That's actually quite a lot. Before recording this video, I decided to Google some images of some concerts with 10,000 people in them, and I was quite shocked on how many that actually is. It's kind of crazy to think that throughout doing all of this, everything that I do on this channel, I've touched so many people, and that so many of you decided to stick around and follow me for more of my stuff. Therefore, I want to thank each and every one of you for making this possible, allowing me to hit this massive milestone and hopefully reach the next one as well. I do want to thank my patrons in particular for the financial support, as well as everybody who has considered buying my products or my services. Obviously, that's what makes this actually possible. That is what allows me to spend the whole day working on this stuff. And I do say the whole day because I actually have a little bit of an announcement here. I'm going full-time in music. While I have been working on this for quite a long time in like a full-time setting, I'm now actually making the step and just completely stopping with university, no longer going to it, and just fully focusing on the music. Now, obviously, this is a big step for me, so I hope that everything works out well. But looking at how the channel has been performing over the last few months, I think that that will be all right. Now, you may notice that I'm sitting in a different room than I usually sit in. That's because I just moved here. Some of you may know that I actually had to move right about now, so that's why I'm here. And the cool thing about this apartment is that I have my own little room where I can actually build up an entire studio. Now, this may mean that the camera angle is a little bit strange and the lighting is a little bit strange. Obviously, I just got here, so I need to still set up some final things. You can see that the background is a little bit strange. Maybe I'll have the camera a little bit more to the side so that the couch is a little bit more in view or a little bit better in view. I don't exactly know how I'm going to go for the camera angle here. I just have a lot more space to work with, so I can play around with having it over there maybe, and I can just play around with it and see how it goes. Now, with all of that being said, let's actually get into the main portion of this video, which is going to be the Q&A. I asked you on a few different places to ask me some questions, and I'm just going to answer all of them. There were maybe 1 or 2 questions that I skipped because I found them repetitive or I didn't really feel like answering them. So if your question doesn't appear in here, then there's probably a good reason for why I didn't answer them. But without further ado, let's get into the first question. Northern Lights asked me, how do you get into this whole production thing? And that's actually quite a funny story. The reason why I started producing is a little bit different from what most people would probably do. When I was in high school, I was always wearing these big headphones around my neck, and people used to kind of jokingly call me the DJ. And I was not very social in school, and I didn't have a lot of friends. So at one point I was like cycling home from school, and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if just one day I showed up having actually like written a piece of music, actually being a DJ? So I started digging a little bit on like, what does it mean to make music? How does that work? And from there I discovered that it really was kind of what I wanted to do. Obviously, as you can probably tell, this thing wasn't a fluke. It was not something that I just did in the spur of the moment, in the sense that I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I'm making all of my money doing this now. But really, it did start kind of like that, like just as a fun thing. Let's just see what happens. What would it even be like making a piece of music? What would it be like making a track? And I don't think I ever ended up sending something to school or showing up with a piece of music at school. But I just found that there was this amazing amount of creativity in there, but also the kind of technicalities that I really like, the technical side of things. Before I discovered music, I always wanted to be an architect because I liked the idea of being able to draw as well as having that technical aspect to it. And for this kind of almost this weird way, I found music basically is the same thing, in the sense that you have this very creative part to it, and then you have to put all of the creativity aside and make sure that it actually works from a technical standpoint. So that's actually how I got into music production, and I've been doing it ever since. Side asks, why do you make psytrance and not, for example, drum or bass or techno? Well, those two genres, for me, they don't really have the kind of sound design that I'm looking for nowadays. I used to do a lot of different genres, a lot of different things. I've produced dubstep for a while, I've produced mid-tempo for a while, I've produced big room house back in the day when I started producing. That's kind of what was kind of the big thing, Animals by Martin Garrix, that kind of stuff. But I've also done house, I've tried some trap, I've tried to make beats for a while. I've tried everything, and then I just kind of came across psytrance. There will be a question about how I exactly got into psytrance later, so I'll answer it then. But I came across psytrance and I found that the sound design in there and all of the technicalities in the way that Not so much like the kick and bass, what people think about, but the overall kind of texture creation and the sound design for psytrance itself is very unique. And that's what I really, really liked about it. Also, as you can hopefully tell by my music, I am a big fan of storytelling through my music. I like to tell stories like that. And I think that psytrance is just a better way to do that than something like techno or drum and bass, or for that matter, any other electronic music genre. Next up is Cauliflower Enjoyer, who asked if I have ever used a tracker instead of a DAW, and if so, what my experience is with them. Well, I've never really used a tracker. I started using FL Studio, and at the time, one of the things that I wanted to do was have a little bit of hardware, and I actually bought this little thing here, this Launch Control XL, which came with Ableton, a light version of Ableton. And this thing didn't really work with FL Studio, as in the way that this works is that you can select tracks right here, and then it will move to the next and the last track. This functionality wasn't there in FL Studio. So if you were to use this in FL Studio, you would basically have control over the first 8 tracks, and that would be it. Whereas in Ableton, you can control your whole project with this thing. Not that I use it much. I have it laid down now because I have a little bit of free space, and I actually want to experiment more with just assigning this to like random knobs, like doing the assignment myself instead of using the template. But anyway, from there, I started using Ableton, and I've been using Ableton ever since because I think that it's one of the most like fast workflows there's out there. I know a lot of people have been clowning a little bit on me with like the Bitwig thing and Bitwig just being better. I really know that deep down Bitwig is a better DAW. And if somebody asked me, okay, which DAW should I start out with? I would probably recommend them Bitwig. But personally to me, I've developed such a fast workflow in Ableton that I don't think that that can be matched in Bitwig. I don't think that that can be matched in any DAW. And one of the most important things about a DAW is how fast you can get an idea from your brain into the actual computer. Basilisk asks, what are the main sources that I use to learn psytrance production? And to be honest, I would say that like 80% of all of the things that I've learned, I've just done on my own through either experimentation or taking something like a tutorial made by Dash or Ollie or whoever was making tutorials before me, before I really started diving into it. And just trying to apply that to more things. What you would usually have is, back in the day, Dash would be doing a lot of tutorials like, okay, here's how you make this one sound in Serum. And I would make that sound and I would say, okay, now I have this sound. Which other 4 sounds can I make from that? At the end of the day, something like a tutorial and even a masterclass like the one that I sell, it doesn't really teach you anything unless you do it yourself. What most people probably don't know is that most of the learning process doesn't actually happen when you're writing music. What I like to do is I like to have a lot of different sessions. And what for me a session is just a moment where I sit down, maybe I have 2, maybe I have 3 hours of time, where I'm just experimenting without any musical context, without the idea of, oh, I have to write a track from this. In fact, I deliberately choose not to write music at that point. Because at that point, I'm learning. It's like a guitarist trying to, find a new way to hold the strings or whatever. Or say, for example, an athlete who is doing bench presses so that they can swim faster, right? You're not really swimming, but you are training yourself to swim better when you do go swimming. The same is true when you're learning to do something like psytrance. You need to hone your skills for production when you actually get to start producing. So that, again, as I said, the amount of time it takes to have an idea and to get that into to the computer is as small as possible. The next question comes from Adrena Krom. I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that right. Mushy Mushy, as he's known on my Discord server. He asked, what are the plans for the next 10K subscribers? Well, to be honest, I'm mainly just going to continue doing what I'm doing here. I hope that I can get that faster, that number, and that we can continue to grow the amount of growth that I have. To give you an example of that, I currently get around 650 new subscribers every month. I would love that to be next year to be around, 1,200 subscribers a month. That the amount of growth that my YouTube channel is gaining is in itself growing. But there are a few other things that I would like to do. For one, I would like to start DJing. In fact, the camera is currently sitting on another desk and I have a complete space that I can turn into like a DJ place where I can just DJ. I would love to maybe start doing a few mixes, but also maybe do a few tutorials on DJing. Obviously, I have to get a little bit better at that because I'm not really a DJ. I've always been producing. I have played a few times for some friends, and I hope that in near future I can start to get some mixes ready so that I can show off my skills and maybe hopefully actually play live at a couple of events at some point in my career as well. If there are any party organizers, then I have a Discord and I have a business email, so you know where you can hit me up if you want to have me play on your party. But another thing that I noticed with this channel is that it's not really focused around me. It's more focused on the things that I provide, right? All of the tutorials that I provide. For example, I now have 10,000 subscribers and only 100 listeners of my music on Spotify. And those are monthly listeners. So there's a very big imbalance between all of the videos that I make and me personally. What I would maybe like to do is have every once in a while just a personal video, maybe like a vlog of my life, maybe just, I don't know, doing something different, something else that I enjoy. Maybe one time I want to make some pasta or maybe do like a cooking stream and then we'll do that together. I remember having a lot of fun building a PC once on stream, and that wasn't necessarily, you know, music production related. So I definitely know that there will be people that will be watching me whenever I do something else, but I would like to try to make that maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, something different. There are some other exciting things in the works though that I cannot really talk about right now, but there will be an announcement for that later. All I can say for that now is that it's a lot bigger than I initially expected. I wanted to announce that thing already in this video, but unfortunately it's just not ready for announcement yet. So there's going to be a separate announcement video for when that is ready and when that's going to release. But you can mark my words, that one is going to be big. Anyway, All Those Effing Voices asks, imagine if you were an alien, what kind of alien would you be? And I personally think that I would be a good alien. I would like to think of myself as an alien that just comes in peace, chills for a bit and then leaves again. DJ LK asks, what are some tips for when you block your mind when you're producing? I think he kind of means like a writer's block here. And my big tip is when you have a writer's block, don't produce. What you want to do is, like I said before, I like sessions where I'm just experimenting, playing around with different things, not necessarily working towards a track. In those cases, you don't really need to have that creativity that you need to really start an idea or really have something special. You can just play around with sounds and at some point something will come. Like I remember many times where I just was like working in a session, trying to maybe, I don't know, make a few presets, make a few different techniques, find a new sound design technique, and I just kind of stumbled upon something. By not forcing myself to write music and not even be in a music like project, but in a session project, there's no weight on your shoulders to actually create something that is acceptable. And in doing so, you actually create some really cool stuff. Next up is Late, who asks which is the track that got me into psytrance, as well as which is my all-time favorite track. And I think they're almost the same track. I would say that The Great Spirit was like the first real psytrance track that I heard, Armin van Buuren and Vici Vini. Obviously that is a very big track and it went really, really massive, but that's the kind of first psytrance track that is rolling bassline, kind of like psychedelic elements. Even if it's very, very progressive, I still consider that to be psytrance. Before that, there were a few tracks by like Gonzi and some other artists that is more like Goa Minimale, which is called. I don't really know if it's an Italian term, but that's a really popular subgenre of psytrance, if you can even call it a subgenre of psytrance. It doesn't really have that psychedelic element to it, at least from the tracks that I can remember. It has been a long, long time since I listened to that genre. But the second track that I've ever heard in psytrance is Deep Jungle Walk by Asterix, and I would still say that that's my favorite track because Asterix is just on another level in terms of storytelling, in terms of adding the feeling to the track, the theming to the track. There's actually something interesting that happens in the Asterix tracks when it comes to structuring. I don't know if it has a lot to do with that, but there's going to be a video. It's probably either out or it's going to be out soon on professional structuring. And in that video, I do explain a little bit about structuring. And I think that that's a key thing in why he has so much theming in his track. He just has a lot of space for the theme to exist in. But even then, I don't think that there's another producer that gets quite at that level of giving your track a unique identity. I know that we all like to marvel on kick and bass design and sound design and a lot of the kind of detail stuff. When it comes to us psytrance producers, we really like when that FM is nice and crispy and The kick and bass is sounding just right. We like to sit there for hours, EQing stuff, tweaking stuff, coming up with crazy new techniques for sound design. But at the end of the day, what makes your track memorable and what makes your track stand out is your use of theming, is your use of storytelling, is the overall arcing idea of the track. And I don't think that any producer does this quite as uniquely as Asterix does, and I think that Deep Jungle Walk is just the best example of that. Next up, Cider asks, what do you know about David Grusch? I'm curious because it's one of the biggest news in history of humanity, and for some reason, maybe exactly because of this, people don't realize it. To be honest, when it comes to these alien leaks, for those that don't know, David Grusch is one of the whistleblowers, I guess, for alien leaks. It always seems to me that the people that leak this kind of stuff have a lot of things to gain from it, right? They get a lot of publicity for it. Even the two people that were in front of Congress, I believe one of them recently released a book as well about this. It always feels to me like everybody that is interested in explaining all of their stories in regards to aliens, they have some kind of ulterior motive. And the second thing is that, to me, it seems that every time we either scream into the universe or we search on Earth for aliens, that aliens kind of step away from us, right? We never really find concrete proof of them. It's always like this sketchy dot on a low pixelated kind of video or stuff like that famous pulsar that was found, the first pulsar that was found. It was this cool static radio signal that we were finding, this pulsating radio signal, and we were all like, oh, this has to be aliens, and then some kind of natural phenomena explains it perfectly. It is really hard for me as somebody that doesn't know anything about aliens and doesn't know the first thing about detecting them. It's really hard for me to take those people seriously when the claim is so outrageous that we have alien bodies in Area 51. It might be true, and in that case, it would be obviously huge news for humanity. But at the same time, I have to think about, okay, they have these aliens. Why would they keep this news a secret? Why would they not at least tell us that this stuff exists, right? Just the government says, yes, we do have these aliens. And there are indeed a few whistleblowers. As I said before, it feels like they always have some other benefits. They always have some other gain that they want to gain with it. I've also seen several clips of the Joe Rogan podcast where people make outrageous claims, not just about aliens, but also ancient civilizations. And always I have to ask myself, what is the actual motive that you're on this podcast making these claims? Is it really because this is true? Or do you want to stir up some news, stir up some attention and just grab some of that attention that everybody seems to want nowadays? When it comes to these thoughts though, when it comes to this, I don't want to discredit them. Obviously, I don't know anything about it. So as I said, I really don't know where to start with this, whether I should believe them or not. It's always, as I said, it feels like I shouldn't believe them. But on the other hand, I have no reason to disprove them as well. I cannot clearly state oh, you're doing it for this ulterior motive, because I just don't know. One of the things you do need to know about me is that I am naturally a kind of skeptical person. My dad always used to say, question everything and even that. Back when I lived with my parents, I used to do a lot of discussions with my father. My father is fairly intelligent, just like me, and we really like discussing things and almost like debating to a point. To me, a discussion is where you are trying to convince somebody else of your mindset and the other way around. Debate is almost like a show where you go for gotcha moments and stuff like that. You know what I mean? What he has always taught me throughout these debates and throughout these discussions is that nothing seems as you first observe it. It's you make an observation and then you have to think once, twice, maybe 3 times, check with a bunch of different things, check with a bunch of different people if that observation that you make is actually true. If it cannot be challenged, then it's probably like that. And if it can be challenged, then it's probably not the way that you think it is. And I've used this mindset all the time. And just looking at this question, it's the same mindset for me. I am going to be skeptical about his claims until I get some more proof, some actual proof that I can point at and I can say, this is completely irrefutable. And then I will celebrate and I will say, yes, we have found the aliens. And obviously, I hope that at some point we do actually find aliens, because I think it would be pretty cool that we are not the only life form. Next question is again from Northern Lights, who asked, what is your favorite psychedelic? And one of the things that I've not really felt comfortable talking about on this channel is drugs. And for obvious reasons, it's not really professional, I guess, to talk about drugs like that. You may have seen that I kind of tipped around the subject of drugs in my video on Burning Mountain. Even at that time, I wasn't really sure about, should I tell this, should I not tell it? But I'm getting so many indications that it's just okay to talk about this stuff nowadays, especially in like my community, that I'm just going to say it. I have experience with mushrooms and acid. Those are my two like psychedelic substances that I have experience with. And I've kind of done it like in two phases. I've done it back when I lived in Budapest, when I started this channel actually, right before when I started this channel, and then in Burning Mountain. And what I've personally found is that acid is better for me than mushrooms. It may be a little bit more intense, but I like the idea that it's very, very controlled. I can almost, turn it off by just really focusing when you're on acid. It feels like you can turn off the effect, not completely. But the last time I took it, I took 200 micrograms, and I was able to just kind of do stuff, just go, not really normally do the things that I would normally do. But if I were to like say, okay, I want to just cook a small meal, I could do that. Not when I was at the peak, obviously, but like 7-8 hours in, something like that, I could just do things again. Whereas with mushrooms, it felt like you take it and then you're just gone for the next 4 or 5 hours, and then you'll wake up and you'll see what happens. I thought about like an analogy for this, for the people that don't really know. To me, it feels like acid is if you're a fisherman and you get to decide how many hooks that you throw in the water to catch fish. At any point in time, you can pull out 1 or 2 hooks to make it a little bit easier, get a little bit more control. But with mushrooms, it feels like you're the fish and you just get hooked and somebody pulls you along and you'll see wherever the ride ends. Now, obviously, this is my personal experience. And as I said, I don't have a lot of experience. I've done both drugs twice. One time was a long time ago and the doses were also a lot lighter. And the most recent time was, as I said, at a festival. So maybe that also changes the experience quite a lot. But overall, I would say that I prefer acid over mushrooms. Next up, Tomzul asked, which games were or are you addicted to? And when it comes to gaming, I've almost completely stopped. I like to play sometimes a little bit of Counter-Strike. Sometimes I like to play an old game called Cossacks. That was actually the first game I've ever played. It's a real-time strategy game, almost like Age of Empires, but the kind of troop capacity that you have, the amount of units that you can build is much higher. You can go into the thousands if you want to. But as you can imagine, it's just kind of like your classical real-time strategy game. You have different maps that you can play on. You have to find different resources. And with those resources, you can build different things that you can use to create your army or upgrade your army. And then you go to battle to either one enemy or multiple enemies. And you can really set up battlefields like that. Other than that, the game that I've actually played the most in my life is Minecraft. Obviously, when I was a child, Minecraft was the big thing. But I really enjoyed it as a game as well. Like I've even played it, I would say, up to like a year ago. I think I last played it seriously. But lately, I've almost entirely stopped playing games and I've just been focusing on production. When it comes to like production like this, what I'm doing now is I'm trying to work the normal like 6 to 8 hours a day on the actual things that I have to do. And then anytime I have free time, that's just time that I can actually write music. As you can imagine, running a YouTube channel, coming up with products, coming up with new ideas, there's a lot of work in there. And sometimes you don't really want to do that. Other people might go to like gaming, but for me, in my mind, I always say like, well, if I don't want to actually work, I can at least write some music, which is relaxing to me, but it's still progressing, kind of being an artist and everything that I do in the music industry, obviously. I do have to say though that I've never really, I think, been addicted to games. If you ask my parents, they're going to disagree, but personally, I think when you're addicted to something, you imagine the kind of classical WoW player who has, the trash piling up on the side and they only order McDonald's so that they don't have to get out of their chair and actually do things. They live with their parents in their basement. I've never really gotten to that point, I guess. I have been very, very close and I have had moments where maybe one day I played like 12 hours or something like that, but that would be, as a child, your day off, your Sunday or whatever, then you can do that. But it's never, I guess it's never gotten to the point where I've been addicted to gaming. I have been addicted to just overall screen usage and the internet, and that's been a much bigger problem for me. Of course, long-time subscribers know that I took a long break of the internet, and even from this YouTube channel here. The reason for that was kind of like an internet addiction and just consuming content all the time, not getting the work done that I wanted to do because I was distracted by the things that were happening on like the third monitor on my computer where YouTube video was playing or live stream was playing or something like that. But nowadays I'm doing a lot better with that, and I think managing my time a lot better, and I'm getting a lot more work done. At the end of the day, I'm always happy with what I've been able to do during the day. Obviously, there's going to be days where there's an off day, and when you're working like I'm doing 7 days a week all the time and you're trying to do as much as possible, some days are going to be shitty days. But I would say like 90% of the days I'm just happy with what I do during a day, and for me that means that I'm healthy doing the things that I'm doing. Next up, Malte asks, how do I get the iconic Hatikwa? I hope I am pronouncing that right. How do I get the iconic Hatikwa sounds? And how do I get girls? Nah, actually, forget it. I only want the Hatikwa sounds. Now, when it comes to individual artists and requests like this, I haven't been doing them for a long, long time. Ever since I returned from the break that I took, I guess almost 2 years now, I stopped doing sound design requests, right? I used to take a track and then just take one sound of the track and show you how to recreate that sound. I've no longer been doing that. And the reason for that is I don't believe it's healthy to just copy somebody else's sound. So I'm not actually going to tell you how to get that iconic sound from his track or how to get that iconic sound from that other artist. Personally, I think it's a better idea to focus on what you can bring to the table as your own unique sound. I know that it's cool to try to imitate another artist that you like and try to get the success that that other artist has, but I can assure you that that's not going to work. And I know this because I've actually tried this. As I've said before, I've been producing for over a decade now, and I started doing a whole bunch of other things. In that other thing that I did, I really tried the big room sound, and specifically the kind of tsunami kind of plug sound. For those that remember, Tsunami was a really big room like track back in the days. I tried for, I would say, almost 2 months to get like that strong kind of plug sound with the kick under there, and really try to make that work as my own thing. And it always just ended up sounding like a worst version of whatever they were doing. If you want to make it in the music industry, if you want to actually kind of get somewhere with your music, then you have to develop your own sound. You cannot rely on being a knockoff of this other artist. And the reason why I say it like this, I know there's a lot of people that just make music for fun, but I feel like every time it's worded like this, like, how do I get the sound from this artist? I feel like people are asking because they think that by emulating that artist, they can have the same success as that artist. That's not how it works. If you're the second person doing something, then you're no longer like an original idea. Here's another wisdom from my dad. If you're second, then you're the first loser. I know that in music it doesn't really work like that, but it does feel sometimes like that when if you have an idea, if it's an original idea, it's going to work. And if you're just copying somebody else, then everybody is going to say, well, why do I not listen to the original if this is just a copy of that original thing? Pilot GFX asks, what is your favorite type of underwear for producing, tangas or boxers? Right now it's boxers, but who knows what the future will hold for me. Next up, Klaus K asks, have you ever seriously considered making a psybient or psychill album? Well, not really an album. I've considered making EPs, and what I really want to do is for each subgenre of psytrance, say like high-tech, dark psy, forest, xenon, that Finnish subgenre that I don't really know what the name for it is, but there's like 10 or 12 subgenres of psytrance out there. I want to make an EP for each one of them. And this is not something that I want to do in, I don't know, the next week or something. This is like a multi-year thing that I want to do. Just slowly, once in a while, make a new track, make a new thing to eventually have kind of like a very broad idea of everything psytrance. And part of the reason is that I think that it's better for the YouTube channel if I'm just well versed in every type of psytrance. And the other part is that I think that each subgenre has something for me to learn that I can then apply to the music that I normally make. Personally, I would say that I'm kind of in between progressive psytrance and full-on psytrance. I don't really know kind of the exact way to classify my music, and to be honest, I don't really care either way. I just write the music that I want to write. But I do think that by exploring each type of psytrance that is out there, each subgenre of psytrance that is out there, I can implement those ideas, the things that you learn for those subgenres, into my music again, and therefore make my own music more interesting. Now, I don't really know when I'm going to be doing like a psybient album or for that matter, any other subgenre. Currently, I'm working on high tech, and after that, I'll see whatever I like the most. I also have a lot of requests for me to cover different subgenres. I think the most requested one was Goa, so maybe I'll go with that. But I have to be in the mood to actually write some Goa for me to actually consider that. The next question is from King Thing, who asked, can you live off your music career? And if so, how did you get there? If not, do you think you'll get there? And what are the steps that you need to take for it to work? Well, I can kind of live off my music. I'm making enough money to not really comfortably live, but at least pay the bills right now. I have some work on the side that I'm using to just get some extra money and hopefully invest as well. What really needs to happen is that I just have another year or maybe 2 years of like good growth like I've been having over the last year in order for me to really take this to, as you would say, a professional level, where I can consider maybe, I don't know, getting a car, maybe getting a little bit of a bigger house, something like that. Obviously, I'm still currently renting and I don't expect that to change anytime soon. But currently, I'm living in the smallest apartment, the cheapest apartment that I could find. And at some point, I would like to really make it comfortable and just get a comfortable living out of this, right? What needs to happen for that is that the growth that I'm having now just needs to continue. It needs to become bigger. What I'm doing, I need to get more jobs in terms of private lessons. I need to get more product sales. I need to start advertising my mixing services that I soon want to start releasing for people. Once I have my new speakers that I want to soon invest in, then I'm going to perform mixing services and mastering service for others. And all of those things just need to grow with the YouTube channel as the YouTube channel is growing now. And as I said before, I would like to see the amount of growth that I'm getting growing in and of itself. As I said before, I am doing this fully now. I have a few like side gigs that I'm doing. I'm doing some editing for other YouTubers and stuff like that. Again, things that I can just do and like plan in my day, and just something that just brings me a nice cash flow that I can use to invest maybe. A lot of that money is still going into my regular bills, but at some point that money would just be extra stuff that I'm getting that I can use to just make the music that I make and make all of the things that I make better. So yes, I can live off my music right now. I can pay all my bills. I can pay everything that I need to. But I would like to see it grow more so that I can actually take this and make it professional. The next question is from Herman von Elsewhere. What are the current trends inside that you noticed? What do you think are their roots? And where do you think they are headed, sound and style-wise? And this is a very interesting question, which, to be honest, I don't really have an answer for. I've been doing psytrance now for like 4 years, I would say. And I've been listening to psytrance for, I guess, 5 years now. And that's from the first time I heard a psytrance track all the way to now. So when it comes to trance, I don't really have like a long-term idea of what is happening to the scene. I wasn't around in, I guess, the early 2000s when it was still developing, and then up until now. Everything that is happening in psytrance is kind of like the post-Vini Vici era of psytrance, as many people would call it. That's all I've ever known. The only thing I did really notice over those last 5 years is that I feel like the bridge between prog as something like what you would say Omiki is doing, or to give other few names, Jilax is another big guy. I guess Neelix is quite big in that genre as well. The bridge between what those guys are doing and, for example, Full On, and even stuff like High Tech and Dark Side, I've noticed that that bridge is becoming a lot bigger. There's a lot more connections between that subgenre and the rest of it. It used to be the case that you were kind of shunned for liking, I guess, prog. Everybody sees it as what you start listening to psytrance, you listen to prog for a month, and then you go into the real psytrance stuff. I really hate that. I think that, to be honest, if you can dance to it, if the main functionality is that you dance to the music, which I think you can do to prog, it has a normal full on the floor kick drum, and there's drops in there, and it has a lot of bass. So in my opinion, you can dance to it. Then I think it's part of psytrance, right? Obviously, there's a little bit more to it in terms of what the bassline sounds like and stuff like that. But to me, something like Omiki is just as much psytrance as, I don't know, Dark Psy or Forced or whatever. But what I've seen is that bridge, those connections between prog and the rest is slowly kind of growing. And the way that I see that is that there's a lot more progressive or prog basslines in the rest of psytrance. You hear a lot of Dark Psy, for example, that is no longer using a rolling kick and bass, but what they'll have is they'll have a very dark kick and then a sliding bass line, which is originally an idea that came from prog. Now, personally, I make the distinction between progressive psytrance and prog. Prog is really that where you have the heavy bass lines that are constantly changing, whereas progressive is the kind of psytrance where it takes a long time to build up. I would say like somebody like Omiki, Ghost Rider, Neelix, that is kind of prog. And then you have progressive, which I would almost say is like Asterix, right? It's not really full on in the sense that it's just kick and bass the whole way through and it's high energy the whole way through. It's this slowly building up kind of energy level over a long time. There tends to be a lot of breaks in there. So that's my distinction between full on, progressive and prog. And I think that those distinctions are, it's slowly morphing into one. When it comes to full on, for example, what I've noticed is that there's a lot of tracks where either the first drop or the second drop has no rolling bass line. There's like a prog bass line, and then you go into a rolling bass line for the other drops that you have in the track. I think the reasoning behind this is that your track becomes a lot more versatile in terms of the time of day that you can kind of play it. Also, the Brazilian scene is one of the biggest scenes, and I feel like their psytrance is expanding a lot more. And that's just a scene that appreciates that prog feeling a lot more than the kind of rolling bassline that we're used to. So I think that psytrance overall, it's becoming more geared to what those people want. I think it should be obvious that if you want to have a successful music career, and especially for those that want to maintain their successful music career, you have to go with the trends. And I think that that's just a trend that will continue to happen. I know a lot of people that are like old school don't really like it, but I do like it. I personally think that it's cool that these changes happen and that things evolve. I would also say that personally, I'm not really attached to the old ways. As I said, I've been making psytrance for 4 years, which in the scheme of things, if you look at psytrance started in like the 70s, right? With the first Goa tracks, 70s, 80s. So I haven't been around for that long of a time. So I'm not really attached that much to tradition. There's a lot of people that debate on psytrance forms about like the traditional way, and as I said before, not real psytrance or real psytrance, whatever. But to me, that doesn't really mean anything. If there's music that makes people dance, then that's good music in my opinion, because that's the goal of psytrance music. The other thing that we probably are going to see more is that there's going to be more development in terms of more subgenres coming to be, right? There's obviously like psybient and psychill have really grown a lot, I would say, over the last 5 years. And now we get kind of psycore, I believe, and psytech, which is kind of techno mixed with psytrance elements. I think we're going to get a lot more of that. And I think for every new like major genre that is coming in terms of maybe like hip hop or I don't know, the techno is now popular, there's going to be like a psytrance equivalent. I believe there's even stuff like psytrap, which is just basically like a hip hop kick and bass, you know, the kick and the 808 combined with psychedelic elements. And obviously that's going to spawn from people who listen to hip hop and want to combine that with the ideas of psytrance. At the end of the day though, you have to always realize that if you want your psytrance scene to be healthy, you have to have that continuous evolvement of the different subgenres, of the different things that are happening, of the different ways that people are creating music. There's a lot of resistance in the psytrance community. There's a lot of debate, as I said before, again, about what is real psytrance and what isn't. And all of that, I believe, just hinders psytrance as a whole. Now, the next question is actually kind of like a continuation of the question that we had before. This is from Andy Transwarp, and he asks, what do you think music production will look like in 10 years' time when I assume we will all have the power of NVIDIA H100 in our desktop? Personally, I think that AI is going to become more involved, and overall, I think that means that music is going to be easier to make. We're already starting to see a lot of plugins using AI to kind of automate a few tasks for you. But I think in 10 years' time, you're just going to be able to hit a button and mix in an element into the track. Maybe not specifically for psytrance, because psytrance is very different in even the way that it's mixed. But at least for kind of the mainstream stuff, the mainstream music production, as in the music production as a whole, that's going to happen. And obviously from those tools, from those like AI tools, new ideas are going to come forward, and they're also going to be applied into psytrance. What I maybe mean by that is that you're not going to be able to maybe cleanly mix your kick and bass using AI, but what you can probably do is, if you have like an orchestral intro, just mix that with the AI and then you have to do the rest yourself. But maybe AI is even more powerful than I think it will be, and maybe you can just press a button and it will create a new FM synth if you feed it 20 different FM sounds. To be honest, I don't know what the future holds. Maybe tomorrow a new plugin releases that's going to revolutionize the music scene as a whole. I highly doubt it, because it hasn't really happened since ever, I would say. Maybe Autotune was the last one that really kind of revolutionized the whole sound of multiple genres and stuff like that. Obviously, I cannot look into the future, but I do think that AI is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger as a tool for music producers. I am going to say that I'm personally a little bit scared of what that means for music producers and the field as a whole. But I do think that it will be a good thing in the long term, as I don't think that AI will completely overtake every musician out there. I think it will be a tool for musicians to just facilitate making music easier. Next question comes from Oren, who asks, where did you learn your music making knowledge, and can you recommend a course for anyone who wants to start making professional sounding music? When it comes to learning, I said it before about the way that I learn through experimentation. What I specifically want to tackle in this question is the classes. I've ever only really used one class that I can remember, like one course, and that's a course by Eclipse. I believe it's Psychedelic Tips Volume 2. I don't think that that's the latest course he has available, but what I can tell from experience is that Eclipse really knows how to make a masterclass. Personally, when I look at an Eclipse video, I tend to think that the intros are too long, in that he talks a lot about the context and he doesn't really show a lot. Personally, I like to dive into the project as soon as possible and really start talking about actually what is happening and what I want to talk about in the subject. But every time I look at an Eclipse video, I feel like he drags on a lot in the intro, and then when he finally comes to the good stuff, he doesn't really have enough time in the video left to properly explain the thing. What I saw in his masterclass is that it's the complete opposite, in that he just dives in and just exactly shows you what he is doing. So I will highly, highly recommend his masterclass for that reason alone. Obviously, he has been around and he knows his stuff probably better than me. If you want another course, then I'm going to obviously recommend my own masterclass. I think it's one of the most, if not the most competitive products out there, because it is 24 hours of footage for the price that most masterclasses present you 6 to 8 hours. I don't want to bash on other content creators here, other people that make masterclasses and that I consider my friends, but I think that when you just look at the amount of time that is in the masterclass and the amount of time that is used to explain what is going on the screen versus the price that you pay for it, I think that my masterclass is the most competitive one out there. And obviously I specifically designed it that way. I wanted to be the best product that is out there, and I think that I've achieved that for now. And at some point there will be a better one that is coming out, probably an Eclipse one or another Dash masterclass or whatever. And then at that point, I'll be forced to make another one that's even better. And that's kind of how it continues. But to be honest, I don't think that it really matters which course that you buy. I've mentioned a few different people here, and I think that each and every one can give you a course that is good enough for you to go from decent in music production to professional quality in music production. The only thing that you have to realize is that it's not about watching the content, but it's about implementing what you learn. When I watch the eClip masterclass, what I would do is I would pause every like 2-3 minutes and just implement everything that has been talked about in that time span of video, and just implement that in my own production that I was working on the side with the masterclass open, so that I could really, think about, okay, what is happening, and actually implement it and be forced to learn it by doing it yourself. And in that way, I do want to say there's not going to be a single course that you can just watch and become better at music production. At that point, it's equally as efficient as to just look at the wall, because you have to do it yourself in order to really learn it. Next up, we have another question from Cauliflower Enjoyer, and he asked if I can play any physical instrument like piano, drums, or guitar. The answer is no. I would like to learn some instrument at some point. Again, I've talked about investments and making investments. One of the things that I would like to buy at some point is a handpan. It's not the first thing on the list. Obviously, that would be the new studio monitors and an interface to go along with that. But at some point, I would like to have the opportunity to maybe have a few instruments, even a few that I can maybe sample into a track or something like that. And I would like to start off with one of those bigger handpan instruments. I don't know if that's a good choice. I don't know if it's easy to learn, or if that's really hard to learn, or if that's even a versatile instrument. I don't think it may be, because I believe they are tied to like one key. But overall, I do think that it would be a sound that would really help and fit within the psytrance tracks that I like to make. Asset25 asks, who are your 3, you can choose 5 if you want, references/favorite artists from all the world? Doesn't need to be psytrance. For example, might be a old rock bands, techno, etc. When it comes to psytrance, if I look exclusively at psytrance, I would say that it's Astrix, Outsiders, and Cambium. Obviously, the first two are fairly well-known names. Cambium maybe a little bit less. He's a French artist, and I believe he has like 6,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. But I really like his tracks because he adds a little bit of extra complexity that I don't hear in either Outsiders or Astrix. And I think his music sounds really, really well mixed and mastered, so I like to use him as a reference as well. When it comes to other stuff, I occasionally listen to some metal still. I used to be a big metalhead and listen to all kinds of bands, from Five Finger Death Punch to Bullet for My Valentine, Metallica, Avenged Sevenfold, Rise Against, Sum 41, everything kind of rock and metal, I would say. Nothing really that aggressive and dark. I was never really a big fan of like death metal or something like that. Recently, a band that I've been occasionally listening to is We Came as Romance. I really like their mix between electronic production and still having mainly metal influences and like mainly a metal track with electronic productions around them. But I don't really listen to music outside of psytrance all that much, maybe like once a month or something like that. So it's not something that I'm actively listening to anymore, I would say. Next question is from Jack. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that name. I will have like a little thing below which is going to show you the questions and the person that they came from. But he asks, do psytrance tracks follow any skill throughout the song? And so this is a very like basic production thing. When it comes to psytrance music, you're always tied kind of to the same scale, in the sense that you're not really changing scales over time. It tends to be the case that most of the bass line and the kick plays on the root note all the time. There are different melodies, but you always stay in the same scale and stay in the same root note for that. When it comes to the breaks, you do sometimes change scale a little bit and play different chords, maybe even in different scales. But even there, what tends to happen is that most of the progressions stay within the same scale. Next question comes from ALDFG, which is, what is your first track? Now, my first track was made more than 10 years ago. Unfortunately, I don't have it anymore. I'm very, very bad with keeping files. Even tracks that I made 3 to 4 years ago, I don't have them anymore because I just delete stuff. Probably on accident. Like, I've lost so much stuff, so much old memories to just, hard drives crashing or me thinking that I have something backed up when I don't have it backed up, and I just delete something that I shouldn't delete. So a lot of those old tracks I don't have anymore, and I cannot play it to you. What I can say is that it's probably worse than you think. It was a bunch of clap samples and then like one vocal and a kick. And I don't think it had a bass line or any melodic element or something like that. And it was just called like Clap Your Hands, the most basic title that was out there. And all it was is some clap build-ups, and then it would get into some kind of drop almost. And I had the kick playing 4 on the floor. I had a vocal shout like clap your hands, and then it would be the kick and the claps, and it would just kind of clap, right? So that would be the kind of rhythm that you were supposed to dance to. Next up is Minster Friendly 1949, who asked, what, in your opinion, is the main topic people like me should pay attention to when starting producing psytrance? Is it the synths and all related themes, or just go with the flow, if that makes sense? In other words, do you think it is necessary to completely understand the function of a synthesizer, or is it possible to find a good workflow without knowing details about how frequencies are built from scratch? Hope you understand. I think I do understand. I think what he meant to say is sound design, like building the frequencies. It doesn't really work that way, I guess. The way that I would say, do you need to learn sound design in order to make psytrance? I don't think you do. You can just get a couple of presets and you can make psytrance that way if you really want to, or you can choose to make psytrance without being very heavy on the synthesizers, maybe 1 or 2, and you can decide to use samples or to use, I don't know, different ideas from maybe real world instruments. You can maybe try to sample some instrument that you know how to play. There's a lot of different things that you can do to make a psytrance track. The question is if it's going to sound professional. And I think for a professional track, what is most important is that you know spacing. And this goes in all kinds of ways. I've talked about spacing in the context of structuring and placing different elements in different places and playing with the energy level over time. I've also talked about spacing in the mixing context, making sure that elements are separated in the mix so that they're easily understandable. This really applies to something like vocals, and if you're working with real-world instruments, then also with those. But even overall, I would say that that's very important in the mixing context. When it comes to what you should focus on when starting producing psytrance is experimentation. It is key that you have a workflow in which, as I've mentioned before, you have sessions and then you have writing tracks. These two things are not the same. This is honing your skills and this is actually writing the music, right? You cannot expect a swimmer, as I said before, to just jump into the water and swim back and forth, and that's the only way that they learn how to swim. They're going to do some push-ups, they're going to do some bench presses, they're going to train their muscles before they're actually ready to, swim into the water. When it comes to something like a warm-up, if you want an analogy to a warm-up, what that would mean is that you listen to some professional music before you go into the studio and before you actually start working on your own stuff. Maybe, half an hour, listen to like 3 tracks the morning that you wake up, and when you start working, you just get that sound in your ears of what the track is supposed to sound like, and then you can start to work on, okay, what do I need to do to get this sound? From a production stage, from a mixing stage, from a mastering stage, whatever stage that you're on, you just focus on actually what you want to look for. If it's production related, then you look at the placement of the elements, the types of elements that are used, the different ways in which elements change over time and stuff like that, all of the production stuff. When it comes to mixing, you listen to what is the balance between elements, how loud are elements between each other. And then for the mastering stage, you obviously listen to the loudness of the whole thing. Next up, we have a question from Karanaima. Again, I'm sorry for the mispronunciation if that's the case, but he asks, what made you choose psytrance as a producer? And to be honest, I don't really remember. I guess I was just playing around with the idea of making a psytrance track, and I really liked what was happening when I was producing that track. And I just kind of continuously did that over and over again. As I said before, I didn't start producing psytrance. I started producing other electronic music genres, and I played around a lot. Eventually, I found that the sound design was just really, really cool and really unique, and I stuck around with it. And now I exclusively do psytrance for production. I exclusively work on psytrance music. I've thought about reviving some of my old projects, some of my other artist names, and continuing on working on that. But every time that I do, what I found is that I no longer have the skill to actually make music that sounds good in that other artist project that I was working on, whether it be dubstep, big room, mid-tempo, the trap stuff that I used to do. All of that stuff just sounds off to me, and I don't really feel like I know what I'm doing anymore in that genre. And right now in psytrance, I'm just extremely comfortable producing, and I can basically anytime get an idea started and get something that sounds at least half decent to work with. Next up, we have a question from Fami88 or Payme88, I guess. And he asks, how do you achieve a fat psy master? I see so much potential in many side tracks, so many unique ideas and original synths and modulations, but the track itself is often quiet and just weak in general. Plus, what would you say to psy producers who don't master their tracks because it's too posh? Personally, I believe when it comes to mastering, it should be very, very easy because all of the fatness and that kind of stuff doesn't happen in the master. What happens in the master is purely loudness, determining the loudness of the track, and maybe some final balancing if you have to. When it comes to the master, the perfect master is a master where you don't have to do anything. Obviously, the loudness and the kind of gluing that you get from mastering very, very loud does seem to happen in the master with your master limiter, especially that like fine peak control that you cannot really do if you're just processing individual channels. But the fatness of a master comes from the mix. What do I say to people who don't master their tracks is you're just not finishing your work. It's like a painter coming over to your house and painting every wall but one. At the end of the day, if you're an artist, you're making a product, something that is supposed to be consumed by somebody else most of the time, right? There's the exception of the people that say, I just make the music for fun, but most people tend to make music so that other people can listen to them. What I would say is, if you're not mastering your track, then why are you releasing it? It's not finished, right? If the product is not finished, why are you releasing it? Why are you putting it out there? And there's a few reasons. Some people say that, oh, I cannot master, so I won't do it. In that case, you won't learn it anyway, so might as well try it. I don't really think that there's people that say that mastering is too posh. I don't know what that would mean. I believe that posh is the word that they use in England to describe kind of the rich people that see themselves above everybody else. I don't think that people who master the track see themselves as above the other artists. I don't think that happens. But I feel like if you're not mastering your track, you're just not getting the full potential out of the thing that you're creating, whereas a master track does have its full potential. Stupid Squid 2220 asks, what makes you start creating a track? Do you just decide that you want a new track and create each part step by step? Do you have some musical idea that you want to experiment with in the context of a track, or do you have a general idea of what you want to produce? And which elements do you focus on to lay out the structure of your tracks? Well, my main workflow really tends to be that I experiment in a session and eventually I just find some kind of cool idea that I want to turn into a track. That's usually how the project starts. It's usually some kind of synth or maybe a melody, maybe sometimes a bass melody or something like that, something strange. But it tends to be either a synth or a sequence that I really like. Usually it tends to sound fairly close to like a real-world instrument, or maybe the idea involves a real-world instrument, because I really like when you get that real-world instrument sounds into your tracks. So it starts from experimentation and then I just write what comes to mind. When it comes to structuring, what I usually do is I lay out my kick and bass first, then I lay out my drums, and then I start writing leads and other stuff on top of that new section. And I just work from section by section, right? So maybe I have a sequence that I start with. I know that that's going to be the third section of the first drop, for example. And I'll just put that in there. I'll have that section kind of filled out. Maybe I'll put in a few effects. I maybe put in a few one-shots. And then I say, okay, now I need to work on section 2 and section 4. So I lay out the kick and bass for section 2 and section 4. I decide which drums that I want, what kind of energy level that I want. And then I need to start finding which exact elements actually satisfy the kind of energy level and the idea that I want to go with. And in that case, usually what happens is once I get started with an idea, I tend to get ideas as I go along, and I tend to be really efficient with something like my sound design. If you've looked at my streams, you'll often find that what I do for example, one shot is that I open up one of my tones from the tones pack, and I put a delay on it, and that's just the whole synth. Maybe EQ out the low frequencies if I have to, but I really want to go fast, right? Because I want to write the idea as quickly as possible. As I said before, doing this Q&A, the time that you spend getting the idea from your head into the computer, if you can minimize that time, you're going to be a better musician. Because you're just going to have more ideas that actually come to, into the track. Next up, the question from the Kai 8981. Who are your favorite artists or tracks? Now, I've already kind of given an answer to this question, but I do want to quickly shout out my own playlist. I have a playlist with, it's called Psychedelic Favorites, and I believe there's a link to it specifically on my Discord server. It has about 200 tracks in it, and that's the stuff that I usually listen to. It's also where I pull all of my reference tracks from. If I have a song that I particularly like, I'll usually buy it on Bandcamp so that I have it as a reference. And then I have it obviously in high quality WAV format, and I can import it and really analyze it and stuff. That playlist is also where I get all of the ideas from Learn from the Masters. That's the series where I analyze other people's tracks and try to pick out something that another artist is doing that you can implement in your own track. So if you really want to know what I listen to like on a daily basis in terms of psytrance, then that's the playlist to do so. If I remember, I will leave a link in the description of this video as well. Shopping Cart 238 asks, what is your favorite bassline? Mine is Curiosity Killed the Cat by Telpa. To be honest, I don't really have a favorite track with like a bassline. For me, a bassline isn't really the main thing that I tend to remember from a track. When it comes to categories though, I would say that the classical rolling bassline 16 notes is just the best that there is out there. I think that there's so many iconic tracks that use that bassline, but I don't think of the bassline as the main element that I focus on when I'm listening to music. So I wouldn't be able to tell you like, oh, this is the favorite bassline I've ever heard from this particular track. I would just say that from all of the tracks that I personally like, I would say that the majority use a rolling kick and bass. The last question that I have, which actually just came in before we started recording this, is from Sonic Flux. And his question is it hard to be a psytrance artist / producer / teacher? And how would you compare this to another job? I would say that it's hard in the sense that you don't really know what kind of future you have. I can plan out for like the next week or the next 2 weeks, but I don't know where I'm going to be at in, say, 6 months, right? I have some goals for over the next 6 months. I have a list of goals that I've specifically written out for the end of the year. But I would say that it's not like any other job where there's usually just like a step-by-step plan of either you can get a career in this job or you know what you'll be doing if you cannot really make a career in that job, right? I've worked in restaurants a lot, and what happens in a restaurant, if you're a cook in a restaurant, is you just show up, somebody tells you what to do, either a ticket or your chef tells you what to make, and then you just make that and you just do that, right? You know that you come to some place and you know that somebody's going to say, okay, I want you to do this, and that. And then you do that and you get home and then you get paid. It doesn't really work in this job in the sense that I am fully on my own here. If I make a mistake, I have nobody to blame but me, right? So at the end of the day, it's hard because you're on your own. You don't really know where the path is going and you don't really know what you need to do to kind of maximize your potential. You're just kind of guessing. A very big part in where you see this is in YouTube. When it comes to the YouTube like algorithm, one, it's constantly changing. It's constantly favoring different things. It's constantly creating new trends. And it's hard to just stay up to date with what I should make in terms of the type of content that I should make. For example, this year I've been focusing a lot more on shorts, and I've even had a few shorts that really popped off in the series where I have like the other intro and then I kind of like react to that intro. That seems to perform really well, but I think that if I do that every day, for example, that it would get really boring and that I would be really stressed out because I would need to spend a significant amount of time finding all of the intros, getting all of the jokes ready, getting all of that stuff ready. And I think that then personally, I would spend so much time on those shorts that the long format stuff is going to suffer. And at the end of the day, that is what's driving a lot of my traffic to, for example, my products. So these are the kind of considerations that I have to make in terms of if I want to have a viewer kind of come into my community, stay there for a little bit, and I want them to potentially buy my products or my masterclass or get some of my mixing services or get a few private lessons with me, then how do I convert all of those people into actual clients, actual people that, are spending money with my services or my products? It makes it a hard job because you're constantly thinking about that stuff and trying to maximize that kind of thing. Now, obviously, I don't want to sit here and make the most algorithmically perfect videos and stuff like that. It would be nice if my videos were algorithmically perfect, but that's never the end goal. What is the end goal is that I can teach you something about music production. That should be the very first thing. If I wanted to make algorithmically perfect videos, I would be imitating Mr. Beast, and I would start every video with, I don't know, some kind of over-the-top intro. I don't really like that. Another thing that is a consideration to if this is a hard job is that, say that you have to make this content that you're making, that you are choosing to make as like a YouTuber for a while. Is it still interesting to make? And I think that with the content that I'm making now, I've kind of proven to myself that I can just do this for maybe another couple of years, maybe even 5 to 6 years. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know what the future holds, but I can see myself doing this for a long, long time. There are types of content that I don't feel like I will be doing for 6, 7 years. Maybe the shorts are part of that, because when it comes to the shorts, they obviously are very, very successful. They are what is driving the current success of my channel, but it's not really fun to make. When it comes to a recording session of shorts, another little bit behind the scenes, I tend to record like 15 at the time. And you can imagine that it's very hectic, switching between projects and stuff like that, and having 15 different little topics that you need to talk about and that you need to prepare, as opposed to where I'm recording one long format video. I just create one topic with one project, and it's one long linear recording session, and then I just edit that down into one video. But overall, the market is constantly changing, so even if I were to stop with the shorts at some point, I would need to find a substitute that would drive that same amount of traffic or even more to my products and eventually, get me some kind of revenue. So that's what makes it a harder job than your standard job where you're, I guess, working for somebody else. When it comes to entrepreneurship, the entrepreneur part, I don't think that it's like particularly hard from like entrepreneur kind of job, in the sense that if I were to, I don't know, start my own business doing something in crypto, for example, I don't think that I would have the motivation to continuously do that. So I think that in that case, it's easier, but it's still an entrepreneur job. And one of the things that comes with that is that there's just a lot more risk involved than your standard 9-to-5 job. Again, to give you an example, I know what I will be doing the next week, but I don't know what I'll be doing in the next month, for example. I don't exactly know what kind of videos I'm going to produce, how I'm going to produce those videos, whatever is going to change, whatever I'm going to change about my channel in the next month. I don't know that yet, right? I don't know what the results of that will be, what the revenue stream will be, what income I can expect. So in that case, it's an entrepreneur job and it comes with the risk of being an entrepreneur. But when it comes to as an entrepreneur job, I think it's the easiest one there is out there because it's the one that I have the most motivation for. So that's going to be all of the questions. I've been recording for almost 2 hours now, but I think this is going to be a good video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. A little bit of behind the scenes, a little bit of a different video, asking me a couple of questions, maybe getting to know me a little bit more. With that being said, I do again want to thank each and every one of you who has subscribed. All of you made this video possible, obviously, because without all of you, there wouldn't be 10K subscribers, so I wouldn't be sitting here filming this video. So thank you all, each and every one of you, from the bottom of my heart. You made this possible. Yeah, that's going to be it. I think that that's everything that I have to say. As I said, more announcements are going to be coming soon. I was hoping that I could make that announcement in today's video, but unfortunately that doesn't happen. But that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know by leaving a like as always. And if you're new here for some reason and this is your first video that you're watching of mine, consider subscribing so that we can get to 20K faster than we got to 10K. I think that will work though, because lately the growth has been amazing. Again, thank you guys all for that, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.